This is Unit 1.1, Ecology and Ecosystems. Ecology is the study of connections in nature between biotic, which means living, and abiotic, which are non-living components. So we are going to be covering ecology the rest of this unit. So levels of organization that we're going to look at in ecology begin at the bottom with the organism. So this is an individual living being. And organisms are part of a population where you have a group of individuals of the same species living together. You can have several populations living together, and those are populations of different species. So when you have that, then you have a community. You can see in this little diagram, you have some cattle and you have some deer, and you have some people riding horses. If you take many communities, right, many different groups of living organisms and put them together, you can put that into an ecosystem. And one of the major differences between community and ecosystem is that ecosystems involve the living parts of the environment interacting with the non-living parts. So this is first where you have both the biotic and abiotic. And then if you take all the parts of the earth where life is found, that is the biosphere. So whether it's in the air or the water and the soil, all of that's included as long as there's life there. So the factors that sustain life on Earth, the first is a flow of high quality energy, which really just goes in one direction. Like we've been saying for the food chains, like energy comes from the sun, goes to producers, which goes to primary consumers, secondary consumers, and then tertiary consumers. So as long as the energy is flowing and it's high quality, then that supports life on Earth. Another factor is cycling of matter or nutrients. So carbon, sulfur, nitrogen, water, phosphorus, these are all matter that cycle through the biosphere. Remember that matter is conserved in a closed system. The Earth is a closed system. So all this matter cycles and changes forms, but it's never created or destroyed. And one of the things about it is that it does cycle, it does change form, and we can track the movement of these nutrients through their different changes and forms. Finally, gravity sustains life on Earth. This allows the Earth to hold on to its atmosphere and helps enable the movement of chemicals through the air, water, and soil and organisms, as we're going to see in the Earth systems unit. Cycling in the atmosphere, cycling in the ocean, even cycling of rock in plate tectonics depends on gravity pulling things that are more dense to the center of the Earth or toward the center of gravity of the Earth. So gravity is an important part of maintaining life on Earth. So please remember, biotic is living or once living, abiotic is non-living. Question, can you see here what is living and what is not living? Maybe it's all living. We're also going to look at symbiosis, symbiotic relationships. Three major types that we're going to look at are mutualism, where both species benefit. Consider here the clownfish and the sea anemones. Commensalism, where one species benefits, but another species is neither harmed nor benefits from the relationship. And then parasitism, where one species benefits, but the other species is harmed. So for each of these, you're going to want an example in order to remember them and possibly use on the AP test. Let's take a look at some relationships here. So dogs and fleas. The flea feeds on the blood of the dog, and the dog can be infected, so this would be considered a parasitic relationship. How about fungus and algae? Photosynthetic algae make food for the fungus, and then the fungus makes a living environment for the algae. That's mutualism. Termites and cellulose digesting bacteria. Right? This is mutualism because the bacteria break down the cellulose taken in by the termite, and the termite would be unable to digest it without the bacteria, so they get an additional source of nutrition. Sharks and remoras. This is commensalism because the remora get the scraps of food, but the sharks don't seem to be affected by the remora's presence. Cattles and cattle egrets. This would be commensalism, where the cattle egrets follow the cattle and eat the insects that the cattle stir up, and the cattle are not affected by the egrets. Finally, humans and tapeworms. Tapeworms live in intestines, robbing the humans of essential nutrients. That would be considered a parasite. We're going to use the word niche, or niche, to describe a species' role in its environment. This niche includes a species' preferred habitat, its position in the food web, and its mating and eating behaviors. As we saw with invasive species, it's possible for an introduced species to take a niche from a native species, right? It might take the habitat, or it might take its position in the food web, or it might somehow disrupt mating or eating behaviors of native species. So when we talk about invasive species taking a niche, this is what we're talking about. Another behavior we see in ecosystems is called resource partitioning. So species can be in competition with each other, right? These are all different kinds of warblers. But over time, they have evolved to avoid competition by dividing uses of resources. So if you have a large enough tree, you might find different warblers in different parts of the tree, because the warblers have evolved to eat seeds or whatever from the different parts of the tree. They forage at different heights. That's right. So the yellow rumpled forage the lowest, and the Cape May warblers forage the highest. This way, all the species are able to coexist by partitioning the resources that are available. Another relationship is what we're going to call the competitive exclusion principle. So if competition is present, species might be excluded from niches that they might otherwise be able to inhabit. So consider that if there was a thalamus only, right, it could live from the low tide all the way up to the high tide. It could live there. However, if there is another type of barnacle present, the semi-balanus, in fact, the thalamus is not able to realize its entire niche. It can't go all the way down to the low tide mark because there's another species there competing for space on the rock. So the fundamental niche is what is possible, but the realized niche is what is actually happening. So that's our introduction to ecology and ecosystems. Please let me know if you have any questions.